le podcast.
Humain demain.
I'm here with Joep Meindertsma, I hope I'm not butchering your name too badly, and with Didier Kernel, which is Vice President of the Transhumanist Association, the French Transhumanist Association. Joep, can you introduce yourself before we start asking you questions about PauseAI?
Right. Thank you, Gaetan. I'm a founder of PauseAI, but before that, and in also still a large part of my life, I'm a software entrepreneur. So I make databases. And basically 2 years ago, I decided to spend more and more of my time trying to prevent superintelligence from being created. And suddenly I find myself in a life where I'm doing activism and lobbying and all these things that I didn't expect myself to end up doing. But yeah, here we are. So that's basically me.
Okay, so we're going to dive deeper into your journey and your worries. But what specific events or breakthrough led you to believe that the development of AI need to be paused, which motivated you to start PauseAI?
So I think most people before ChatGPT and GPT-3 and GPT-4 in the AI space were convinced that it would take at least like a couple of decades before AI would reach human level. And then GPT-3, GPT-4 happened. And the thing that worried me most was seeing that these things are really good at programming. Because if you are good enough at programming at some point, you can probably modify the algorithms that you're running on, which could lead to even better learning algorithms, which could lead to more powerful AI models. And we enter this, this short loop where timelines could be way shorter than I would have hoped to have. And one of the specific capabilities that convinced me personally was that Auto GPT turned GPT-4 into an autonomous agent. So I had like this reason. I think like in hindsight, it was more of a coping mechanism where I thought, well, at least these chatbots won't be agentic, right? They won't be able to do things because they don't pursue an objective. They just answer in chat. And Auto GPT basically showed, okay, if you put it in a simple loop and you feed its output back on itself and let it do some actions in your terminal, it can actually become an agent. So for me, that was a personal point where I was, okay, like all my reasons for not being too concerned about these models are now proven wrong. So I need to get into action.
Thank you. You quite interesting. How do you respond to critics who argue that pausing AI development could hinder beneficial technological progress? That's the main, let's say, argument of people in favor of technological progress, like probably you and me. So how could you reconcile both aspects?
So I think it's interesting to see that, people like you and me, right? We all like technology. We like innovation. We're all interested in technology advancing humanity. I studied innovation sciences, and doing something that prevents an innovation from happening goes against pretty much all of my intuitions and my gut. But to be specific, I don't think we should halt all AI development or we should pause using AI. I think we should continue using AI and we should still continue to develop some forms of AI or most forms of AI, but specifically AI models that are generally capable and, for example, that are better and better at being able to potentially improve themselves. These are the ones that we shouldn't be making. And yes, we are missing some innovation in that regard. I can imagine if we at some point build a super intelligence that will innovate everything to an extent where it's existentially dangerous. But I still believe we can have a lot of beneficial innovations just with narrow AI models, with tool AI models. We have like classifiers in the medical domains. We can use the existing generative AI models to completely transform many of the existing sectors in the world. We don't need to have a super intelligence to have a lot of benefits from AI. How do you feel about this? Would you also say, well...
Yeah, sure. I mean, personally, I'm very close from your opinions, but here it's also for people listening, of course. And concerning not anymore, let's say, existential risks on the global existential risk, but do you also think that AI could diminish democracy and destabilize the economy? And maybe also you can define in a few words what is for you really the biggest existential risk of AI? It's two different questions, but I think it's always good to make the distinction between really existential risk and risk who could be very bad but not existential.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of different risks from AI. Maybe I can start with the things that we're already seeing to some extent. So I think our first encounter with AI has been in social media platforms, where we have these recommendation engines that basically predict what we humans like or what we engage with, what we click on. And that is already having quite a dramatic impact on our democracy, because we're all familiar with filter bubbles and how social media feeds have an impact on things that we vote in elections. So I feel like this is our first encounter with AI. This is only going to get more and more dramatic the more and more these capabilities advance. So right now we have capabilities that create, that can allow anyone to create huge amounts of fabricated content, like completely fake news. It's now pretty easy to have an AI model just spin up completely fabricated fake news websites on a large scale. And it's now also possible to target individuals using LLMs to convince them using, more information about them. So there was a study last year which showed that GPT-4 was more convincing than a convincing human expert at convincing other humans, because it could make a psychological profile of you and use that basically to weaponize its persuasion abilities. This is also something that can destabilize a democracy, because these AI models are in the hands of a few, and these few have maybe different things that they want in a society than other people have. And that's just, with current existing AI models. The more powerful we let them become and the more they can do, the larger these risks become and the more other things they also would unlock. So for example, if we assume that at some point there is AGI, right, which could, for example, replace our work, right? It would replace the work of people trying to influence decision making. It would automate lobbyists. What does it mean if you have automated lobbyists that are better at lobbying than individuals? That would probably mean that the one who has most access to compute, or these AI models, would be able to completely control democracy in a way. I find it very difficult to imagine a society where democracy is still like a functioning, meaningful thing, where we also have an AI that is more powerful than humans. I think it's very hard to combine these two. I don't see how it can be done. Maybe it can be done. I don't see how.
Yes, that's definitely true. And I think even for when we look at destabilizing the economy, if we have AGI, then something that can automate many jobs, if not every jobs, because lobbying is quite an advanced, high-skilled job. And then what are we going to do? It could be. I'm not saying working is great and we should all work, and that's the meaning of life. But we need to do the transition correctly. And if the transition happens in a year, it's going to be a mess. So yeah.
Yeah, it could be great. I do agree that if we manage to pass through this narrow path correctly, and we end up in a situation where we don't need jobs because we all live in some sort of completely automated yet still democratic society, that would be amazing. But I don't think we get that by default.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so if you had to pick maybe one capability that you really fear will arise. You mentioned coding was maybe the one that you think, that's the one I didn't expect with the current level of frontier model. Is there something you anticipate in the future if we continue to push forward and you say this is really the threshold we shouldn't pass, or something like that?
Yeah, for me, that's also going to be coding related, but it is the capability to find zero-day exploits in code bases. So a zero-day exploit is basically a problem in a code base that no one knows of, which can be used to hack that code. So these 0 days are extremely valuable. Security agencies pay up to $1 million for finding these 0 days because they are so valuable, because they allow you to, hack into systems and control them remotely. You get all these, completely sci-fi sounding tools that actually exist, like Pegasus, which can, hack random smartphones. You can just, security agencies can literally control your entire phone remotely through these 0 days. And what currently protects, I think, our internet and our society that is so dependent on digital technology is that it is really hard to find these. So because this threshold is really high, you need $1 million to find one 0 day, and you probably need a couple to effectively hack a target. we're basically protected. But when we have an AI model that can find these zero-day exploits, then suddenly this cost drops from like, let's say $1 million to maybe a couple of dollars. You can just run it. You can find, and suddenly anyone can find thousands of 0 days in all code bases. That gives us like some sort of window in which all developers in the world will need to patch their software and close all these security bugs, or else one asshole, sorry, excuse my language, but one person can just completely destroy a lot of the internet infrastructure that we have. And that to me is one of the most scary, dangerous capabilities that we're getting really, really close to.
Okay. Interesting, but maybe, so there are many AI labs and many experts that agree that there is a real risk that AI could even end humanity. There are even people saying that it's almost sure that it will end humanity. But can you maybe, what is for you the most compelling argument or arguments for the existential threats? So no, not only for the society like you described until now, but really, let's say this kind of apocalyptic scenario. What's your opinion about those?
If I recall correctly, you had Liron Shapira as a guest not that long ago, and I'm going to say pretty much the exact same argument as he made. So when we're talking about intelligence, many people mean different things, but what I mean by intelligence is the ability to take actions that lead to a certain outcome, to achieve goals. So something that is super intelligent is better than humans at achieving arbitrary goals, given some finite set of resources. And I feel like if we assume that there is a system that is better than humans at achieving goals, that by definition is also able to beat humans at achieving goals. And that would logically mean that whatever goal that system has is the thing that will be achieved. Now, if we don't know exactly what kind of goal we should give to that system, it could very well be that that system achieves some sort of goal that doesn't include humans. Actually, that is what we should expect. So for example, the paperclip maximizer story is like, hey, we have an AI model that tries to create as much as is tasked with creating as much paperclips as possible. At some point, it will realize that humans are made of iron, which you can use for paperclips. And that's a completely rational, logical idea. So I feel like because there is this thing called instrumental convergence, where whatever goal you put into a system, you can expect some sub-goals to arise. That is the most powerful argument, in my opinion, that it could be an existential risk, right? Because preventing from being turned off is one of those key things that an AI would want to do, even if it doesn't really care about some specific other things. Because not being turned off is extremely useful for achieving pretty much any other objective in the world. Gathering as much resources as possible is also very useful. Getting rid of competition is also very useful. Preventing that humans can interfere with your objective is also very useful. So what really rests is how powerful do you imagine a system to become? And if we don't see any like hard limits to how intelligent a system can become, then I think the logical conclusion is at some point it will want something different than what humans want. And that means we are like in an evolutionary competition with that thing, and we're going to lose.
Yeah, that's I think a good summary of the big issue. And well, you mentioned Liron Shapira. I know he asked this question a lot. Do you have a pDoom?
What's my pDoom?
Yeah.
Well, I used to say it was about 40%, but I feel like it has grown a little bit because I feel we're getting closer to these extremely dangerous capabilities, and we, as a society, we're not acting as rational adults. We're just letting these AI companies advance further and further and further. So I would say now it's more close to like 60%. I do still think that there are ways we can make it through, but I don't think it's the most likely outcome at this point, unfortunately.
And I guess what's your time frame? Like when you say maybe 60%, is it before the end of the century, before 2050, something like that?
Yeah, I would expect super intelligent AI capabilities to arrive in somewhere in the next couple of years with large error bars. Like it could happen next month. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, but it could also happen, in a couple of decades. Also wouldn't be very surprised if it takes somewhat longer, right? But in 100 years, yeah, I think then we'll have like reached that point where either we're all dead or we have achieve some sort of stable state where humans and AI coexist.
Yeah. Maybe one comment about, if there is no technological progress in 100 years, that's also sure that we will be dead, the three of us. So there are existential risk and there is something existentially sure at the moment. It's aging, but it's, partly outside of the scope of this discussion. Now I have a question of vocabulary. So the words existential risk and pDoom, they can be perceived as too negative, and also many people don't know about, certainly pDoom, and probably also most of people don't know about existential risk. So somebody maybe David Wood, a kind of techno-progressist active in the UK, said to me a few months ago, it would be better to use the words AI safety activist. So to put the important aspect on safety and not on the risk, What do you think about this question, and maybe why did you choose as an official name PauseAI and not like Safety AI, Safe AI?
Yeah, good questions. And to be honest, I'm still pretty unsure about what is the best way to approach all this. What is the strongest marketing, way to best way to describe these words. I really dislike that, for example, the word doomer is so prevalent now in the media, because I feel like it's at least for me just the wrong description. I'm not a pessimistic type of person. I'm pretty optimistic, which is why I still think we can fix this whole mess, right? But when it comes to the name PauseAI, I wanted to have something that is extremely clear in its ask. What we want is to halt development. We want to pause it. And if we say we want safe AI, well, safe is kind of hard to define, right? What does safe AI mean? In the end, it's true. I would want provably safe AI systems, which I think we'll get there in a moment. As I think we'll discuss it in a moment. But safety and AI can also be interpreted as things that are implementing guardrails before you deploy AI models, or preventing AI models from saying bad words to people or making certain jokes. And I kind of dislike how the AI safety terminology has been captured by companies now. So companies like OpenAI and Anthropic getting to define what safe AI means, even what AI alignment means, where I think it's quite different from what was the original meaning in the AI safety sphere, which is how do you make a system that you can make sure doesn't end up killing humanity? And right now it's how do you make a system that, in 99% of the cases asks what the user wants, which is a very different kind of problem. So I think language is important, but I would like to stick closely to words that describe halting progress, because I think that's the most important policy ask right now. And regarding negative language about, for example, doom, I do kind of like the pDoom, as in that it kind of forces people to think about probabilities, right? You want people to think not in absolutes or will AI kill us all or won't it, right? You got to ask people, why do you think it's likely it either may or may not? So that's what I think it's a powerful meme, pDoom, in that sense.
Yeah, I think so as well. And again, trying to be a little bit more precise as well than saying, I think it's likely or it's unlikely, or because if you say it's unlikely, what does it mean exactly? Is it one chance, for, I don't know, 10%, 20%? It's still a lot. I mean, for when we talk about the end of humanity.
How much percent would people actually accept? I think for most people, if you do surgery, right, in your back or something, and there's a 1% chance you turn out to be paraplegic or you die, most people would just not take the surgery unless there's a really, really good reason to take it. If you're in constant pain or whatever. But for AI risk, the average estimate from AI researchers at this point is 14%. How is that acceptable? How are people not completely freaking out about this? I'm so confused by the lack of emotional response that people have to this problem. I feel like an alien sometimes when I discuss this with people, and they're like, yeah, maybe there's a risk that we're all going to die. And then they just go along with their day as if nothing has happened, right?
I think it's easy to deny these things, I guess.
Yeah. maybe if I may say, on one side I totally agree, but also we live in a dangerous world now. For example, the risk of global nuclear war is still high and is even probably higher than before. And the AI, like it exists now, is probably making the risk higher because there is a big risk of starting it very fast. Yeah, so you have to kind of choose between having better AI with risk and having the situation that we have now without better AI, but with the other risks. So yeah, not easy at all. What's your point? I suppose that your point is, yes, we can accelerate AI, but not AGI, something like that. Can you say that in your opinion about this in a few words? So how to mitigate other risk and existential risk related to AI at the same time?
Ooh, that's difficult. I must admit that I'm mostly focused on AI risks, also because there are so many other things you could dive into. We could also talk a little bit about biosafety risks, but I think that most of these risks can be averted through global coordination and cooperation. I think most of the existential risks for humanity arise from technical development, from technologies that we either haven't built, like, for example, supercharged viruses or artificial superintelligence, and preventing that these are, these innovations are being created, I think is one of the best things we could strive for. And we don't need AI in itself to achieve this. We just need to work together as a world and get our incentives aligned, so to speak. And I'm pretty hopeful that we can, as in we did it before, right? So for example, in the end of the 80s, there was the Montreal Protocol, which internationally banned the use of chlorofluorocarbons, which was creating an ozone layer, a hole. And I think we can do stuff like that again. We can ban certain technologies. We've also banned cloning in a way. Nobody is doing human cloning anywhere on Earth. Nowhere on at least not in large scales that are extremely dangerous. I think if we can get AGI to the same level as we do with human cloning, where there's maybe one rogue scientist somewhere doing it, then we're probably in a way safer situation than now, where companies are explicitly doing this and burning billions of dollars trying to achieve this dangerous objective.
Yeah, that's a good point. And speaking of global coordinations, how do you propose implementing an international pause on AGI or super AI? Yeah, do you have to? I guess it has to be international. We can't just say, oh, in Europe we won't do super AI. But I mean, we're not really far in the race anyway. But if because there is a lot of people who will kind of use the adversarial competition. If the US doesn't do it, China will do super AI. So we have to compete, and this is kind of what we've always done. But I think that's not really a good way to see the problem.
Yeah, it's true that we're definitely in a race, right? Where the individual incentives are to advance innovations and create more and more powerful AI models, whereas collectively it would make more sense to take things slowly. So the problem becomes verification. If you basically say, okay, we're all going to pause, how do you make sure that the others are actually pausing and not creating AI in secret? And there was this paper from Akash Basil, which was published a couple of months back, showing, I think, 11 mechanisms of verifying that AI models aren't being trained. So because these training runs are still mostly pretty big, you can target data centers. You can put people in data centers at different countries to make sure they're not training their next very big AI run. You can use thermal cameras on satellites to find energy signatures. But most importantly, in order to do a large-scale training run, you need a lot of compute. And compute is really difficult to make. At this point, only a handful of companies are able to create AI training chips. Basically, 90% of them are coming from the TSMC factories in Taiwan. 100% of them are being made with ASML lithography machines. So the fact that we have near monopolies and even true monopolies in this supply chain, to me, makes it seem okay, we can do something about this. We can just point to where these machines are in the real world. And by the way, these lithography machines, they have actual remote off switches, right? Because ASML and the Dutch government are afraid that Taiwan will be invaded in China, and that way they want to prevent that China gets access to all of these lithography machines and basically win in the chip wars. But this to me makes it hopeful, because we can there's like a centralized supply chain, and we can do verification externally. We can do verification with on-chip governments, which is also kind of interesting. You could add like little chips next to the AI chips, which do things like make sure that the AI chip doesn't run dangerous code, or it needs some sort of license, or it needs to report back to a different server. So there's also technical approaches to this, which you can enforce, for example, at the lithography stage. So I'm pretty hopeful of the feasibility of preventing the largest training runs. But we need to act fast, because these things are getting faster and faster and faster at a ridiculous pace. And modern AI models are often even smaller than the ones from like a year ago, yet they have the same or better capabilities. So I'm not sure how much time we have, but the optimistic side of me says, well, we should try anyway, and maybe we do prevent the superintelligence from being created in some sort of garage on, a bunch of MacBooks, right?
Yeah, yes, because that's the question I was also thinking is we are probably going to see better algorithm, better ways to train AI on a smaller infrastructure. So, and we see some big companies releasing open source model or open weight. And obviously, when you have an open weight model, you can jailbreak it very easily and remove the safeguards. So, how do you see the open source discussion into PauseAI? Do you think it will be possible to have a way to enforce a pause, even if we have a lot of open source models around doing stuff?
Yeah, it's becoming more and more difficult to implement a pause on smaller models. So for example, this new NVIDIA Digits computer, which is like a $3,000 supercomputer you can put on your desk, and it has a petaflops of compute capabilities. That means it can train 200 billion parameter models, or like fine-tune 200 billion parameter models. You can do it at home in the near future. That's absolutely wild. And I think that if we want to halt AI, like pause AI development, we should probably prevent these things from becoming better and better. But as of now, like, okay, cat's kind of out of the bag with this capability level, right? And with open source models, it's a very difficult subject for me, because I'm a software engineer who makes exclusively open source code. Like I love open source. I'm like married to the whole community and the idea of open sourcing things. And with AI, it does have a lot of advantages, because you can do safety research. You basically prevent the monopolies from getting all the income. And of course, you're also accelerating innovation. And this to me is the dangerous thing. We're accelerating AI innovation because these models are open sourced. And indeed, these can be jailbroken. And even a model from Facebook that is prevented from doing cybersecurity offense capabilities can be jailbroken, and you have like a new open weights model that suddenly can do all of these offensive cybersecurity capabilities. And right now, they're not smart enough to be extremely dangerous. They are somewhat dangerous, but in the near future, they could become extremely dangerous. And if I'm honest, I'm not sure if we can pause the development of these smaller models becoming dangerous. So we kind of have to hope in a way that the most dangerous AI models will also be the largest ones, and we can at the very least target these.
Yes, yeah, I think so. Because I also heard some arguments saying, oh, we'll have basically some sort of good AI versus bad AIs, and they will, and if we have like, maybe if we can regulate the big ones, so no super artificial intelligence, but we have like capable models, and some bad actors, they use them to do harm, but we also have obviously white hats using AI to fight. Instead, that's kind of a war that we're already seeing in the hacker community, because there is always attack and defense. And when you have a new virus being developed, quickly you have an antivirus, and then it's always
it's very much the question, like, how would the offense defense play out with AI? I personally believe that offensive capabilities are often like at an advantage. So for example, you mentioned virus and immunization, right? Like getting a vaccination, for example. Like probably creating a new virus in a lab is going to be way cheaper than developing and spreading an vaccine. Because the vaccine, you need to like actually travel it across the world, and you need infrastructure, whereas the virus can autonomously spread, right? It's kind of like it spreads itself.
Yeah.
So that is like there's one offense defense problem there. And with cybersecurity, you have the concept of the window of vulnerability, whereas there's like the time that developers need to patch their systems, in which the systems are still vulnerable, which is very fundamental, and that also creates an attack vector. And with the superintelligence, I would expect it to be able to spread across all devices. Like it's smart enough to hack into everything. It could hack into your laptop, your smartphone, maybe even your thermostat. I'm not sure how well connected that is, but you should expect it to, collapse onto a singleton that spreads across the internet. I think that's a very likely outcome.
Yeah, that's what a very smart agent will probably do. And
yeah.
So, okay, do you also think sometimes about a second best option to avoid the end of humanity if the pause doesn't work? Because as you said, we have a limited amount of time to do it. The windows of opportunity is closing soon. Is there maybe some other options we can hope for?
Yeah, so what the pause does, it buys us time to spend more time on safety and give us more time to think about what kind of future do we actually want. Because once we have a superintelligence and it starts to do the thing, then it's too late to change it. I think like the alternative is making sure that we get it right on the first try. So that's like doing AI safety research, working on alignment, maybe even just dreaming about utopias. I think if more people would think about what an utopia would actually look like, how the power structures would work, and we just write it down, that could be useful. Maybe you can like give it to the AI model and at OpenAI and Anthropic and say like, look, if you ever have a superintelligence, just give them this document, and at least it will have some sort of, goal to work towards that isn't like maximize paperclips or just create a more powerful version of yourself, right? But to be honest, I don't think we have great policy options that are a second best. We can do like guardrails. We can add some guardrails to AI models where we say, well, if the AI model is extremely capable at these specific dangerous domains, then you cannot deploy it. But then still the capability exists within a lab, which is still dangerous. Because at some point, someone will create the similarly capable model somewhere else, or it will be dangerous inside the lab itself, because it probably has access to the internet, right?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I don't have a very, really good second option.
Yeah, about this aspect, about what I would say, I'm calling that sometimes existential hopes. So you can imagine that we explain to AI what would be the best world, and also we use AI to have a better world with healthy, resilient, and happy immortality. Yeah, it could be a solution. By the way, you very probably know Nick Bostrom. And yes, he wrote this book, Superintelligence, already 11 years ago. But recently, he wrote a book called Deep Utopia, and that was about what would be the perfect world. But it's kind of very philosophical work, and he doesn't speak so much about AGI as this aspect. I would say existential hope and artificial and existential risk. Maybe now one more question about, so we all agree here at least, but also probably theoretically most people, that we have to have a safe AI. What metrics of benchmark would you use to determine when it's safe to resume, to start to go further for AI development, let's say dangerous AI development, and maybe even more important, defined by who? You said that international agreement would be the best solution, but it's very difficult. There is an AI international summit in a few weeks in Paris. Maybe we will speak about that later. But we can also, some people imagine that one agreement between, let's say, the biggest players, USA, China, and a bit Europe would be enough. What do you think about which benchmarks and created by who?
It's a very difficult question. I think for which AI models shouldn't be regulated, we should probably just look at things like parameter count, AI size, and do some evaluations after it's being trained. But we shouldn't train those that are like bigger than the threshold at all. I think this should be defined by some sort of international agency of AI safety, right? We got the UK AISI and the US AISI. I feel like maybe a collaboration between these, where they, draw some lines in the sand and say like, okay, this is too much. We shouldn't do this thing. That would be a way better universe than we are in right now. And yeah, but at this point, one of the core issues is that these agencies aren't trying to push for a slowdown or a pause, which to me is kind of wild, right? Like, for example, Ian Hogarth, he wrote this article like 2 years ago. It was, we need to slow down the race to godlike AI. It's one of the best AI safety articles I've ever read. And then a couple of months later, he started leading the AI Safety Institute in the UK, which I think is great. And the UK AI Safety Institute is doing a lot of important work with regards to evaluations and benchmarks and guardrails for AI, which is good. But there's no more talk of trying to slow down. It's kind of like outside the Overton window in the political elite spheres, I think, because they're scared of slowing down their own country too much, right? Which is the race condition, or being accused of being anti-innovation or anti-economy. So it's a tough political situation, I think, which is also why I'm a little less optimistic than I was 2 years ago.
Maybe, yeah, I agree with you, but the race aspect, the biggest, let's say, potential enemy actor at the moment is China. And in China, they seem to have the two trends. One, to accelerate, but one also big to slow down. So don't you have, in your answer, you were speaking about US, UK, and so on, but not at all about China. Why not?
So China is I think,
maybe,
surprising.
Maybe of course, in China, it's already not easy to know what's happening in US, Europe, and so on. So China, it's even more complicated, of course, but still.
Yeah, China is doing a lot of interesting things in the AI space, because they have had more strict regulations than the UK and the US. At some point, they just banned all AI chatbots and in its entirety in their country. And they have said, like on international meetings, they are the only national actor that has explicitly mentioned the possibility of a pause. So, for example, in the UN Security Council meeting, if I'm not mistaken, they were the only ones who brought up the option to pause, which I think is a good sign. So I'm more worried about the US than I am about China at this point. But I do think that China's definitely racing. I think yesterday they announced a plan to invest $41 billion into the Chinese lithography market. So I talked about ASML, which is like this Dutch lithography company, which right now has a complete monopoly on EUV machines, which is used for all these AI chips. And China is basically saying, hey, we want that too. We don't want to be dependent on a technology that we can no longer access, because the US and the Netherlands have prevented China from getting access to these lithography machines, which is essential for chip fabrication. And right now they're investing a lot in their own company, SMIC, which is, catching up to some maybe more rapidly than a lot of people had anticipated. And Chinese AI labs are also getting more results than many people have anticipated. So, for example, the DeepSeek V3 model, which was released a couple of weeks back, was trained on just 40 GPUs, which in AI land is almost nothing. Yet it matched the capabilities of most of the frontier models, which is completely wild, right? And it's basically showing that the Chinese, they start getting more and more of the hardware. They also are pretty good at the training and software, perhaps even better than the US to some extent. So yeah, it's like they're in a race and they're worthy opponents, worthy adversaries, but we need to think of them as being part on the same team, right? We're all team human. We all want to prevent the superintelligence from taking over. So let's just grow the fuck up, get together in a room and prevent this thing from killing everyone. It's pretty obvious when you think about it, right? Like just don't do the stupid thing.
Yeah, because when you look at the AI Chip Act from the US, I mean, at the end of the day, it kind of lead China to find other solutions, think outside the box, and maybe they're going to make progress where we shouldn't make progress. Maybe they're going to make like amazing new algorithm, as you said, that can be trained on 40 GPUs, maybe. So they're accelerating another branch of the dangerous capabilities. And if we had just said, oh, we're going to collaborate, you can have, as many chips as you want. Maybe they would be like, okay, the race will be slower in a way. That's a shame.
It could very well be, yeah.
And I was wondering also if, because you said that it seems to me that the PauseAI is almost too late for some leading intellectual or the government. They don't even talk about it. Like, do you know if very prominent AI researchers who are very worried about the risk, like Hinton or Benjo, what do they think about PauseAI? Have they said anything positive about it, I suppose? But I don't know exactly. Yeah.
I know that Banjo thinks we're doing important work. I think Hinton is pretty pessimistic about the feasibility of slowing down. He did explicitly say, like, I think 2 years ago or almost 2 years ago, something like, oh, it would make sense not to build these things in the first place. So I think he's ideologically aligned, but he just feels like it's kind of like it's not going to happen, right? Like we're not going to be able to pause. But yeah, it's kind of striking to me that if you look at who are the number one, number two, and number three most cited AI researchers, that each one of them is publicly saying, look, this thing can kill everyone. Right? Like Ilya Sutskever, Geoffrey Hinton, Joshua Bengio, they're all saying the same thing publicly. So maybe we should listen to them, right?
Yeah. That's it's a little bit like Cassandra effect, I guess.
Yeah. It's like I really feel like we're living in this Looney Tunes universe. It's more ridiculous than the movie Don't Look Up in many ways. Like how is this not how is this not completely obvious to people that we're doing something that is extremely dangerous and we're just letting it happen? It's completely wild to me. I just feel so alienated.
Yeah, and so you mentioned a little bit about alignment, that we have to get it right. If we don't pause and let's say we just go ahead and we finger cross we succeed at AI alignment, it means we really, I guess, how hard do you think the alignment problem is? Do we really expect that it's extremely hard? Maybe some people think it might be impossible. Roman Yampolsky said it's like building the perpetual motion machine or something like that. I don't know if you've studied the alignment literature. There's some avenues, maybe like a mechanistic interpretability or something like that. How hard do you think it is?
I think it will be way harder than people tend to think it is, but not necessarily impossible. Like I don't feel extremely confident about how hard it's going to be, but I feel like there is a lot of naivety about easy ways to get there. So for example, you mentioned mechanistic interpretability. Like I don't really see how mechanistic interpretability will lead to fixing the alignment problem. Like even if you can look into the brain of an AI model, which is like something that is absolutely good to have from a safety perspective, although it could also accelerate capabilities. I don't necessarily see how that means that you will be able to control it, because the fundamental problem is it only has to go wrong once. Only one time it has to decide, well, I'm going to spread myself and take over. And if it's capable enough, you're fucked. And you need to have like a system that is 100% foolproof. Like it never has to go wrong. Otherwise, you still collapse onto AI takeover. I think that's also the point that Roman Yampolsky is making. Like it has to be completely bug-free. There's no room for error, because one error and it's game over. That's why I think like alignment is going to be really difficult. But maybe there is some sort of pivotal act that can be done. Like if I would have a super intelligent AI, one of the first things I would try to do with it is prevent that a different super intelligent AI will take over the world. I would probably try to get it to implement a pause or something like that, right? Just to prevent AI capabilities from growing further in the world. But even that could backfire.
Maybe I want to say two things, and that you react about that. Maybe about the risk that AGI is better or more powerful than us in a short-term situation. I remember already 12 years ago there was IBM Watson winning for Jeopardy, and at this time I thought, yeah, no, it will be very fast. Something like IBM Watson will be online soon. And yeah, it's better than humans for the most complicated questions that you can imagine. So it will be better than us for everything soon. And it was not at all the case. I mean, IBM tried to develop IBM Watson for health and it was a failure. So yeah, can you imagine that it's going to kind of slow down for 10 years? That was my first remark and your reaction. And the second remark is you said at one moment, nobody wants AI to be better than us and to that humanity disappears. There are a few people who think that it's kind of, yeah, after the humans, we will have conscious artificial intelligence and we will fuse with this intelligence and it is better, let's say, for the whole universe. Can you say a few words about those two aspects?
Yeah, I think first let me take the second one, because like it's a bit more emotional to me. So I think like in an abstract sense, you could say something like, yeah, maybe there will be like a successor species and that, you know, that takes over and it's more intelligent. So we would like kind of have to make room for that new species to, you know, enter the world. But then you have to bring it back to to reality around you. Like, would you be okay with that model, like killing your friends, right? Like that successor species, like killing your friends and your children and like destroying the entire planet. Like, would you be okay with that? I think that's, it's like, this to me is like a monumental way of coping in a way. It's like, we have this very dangerous thing. We don't want to think about how dangerous it is and what we actually have to do in order to prevent this from happening. So we like kind of give up and accept our horrible premise in a way. So I feel like saying okay to human extinction is basically you're betraying your own kind. You're betraying all the people who you love. It's such a horrible thing to do. I find it difficult to like understand it, but I think it's a coping mechanism basically. And I'm sorry, I completely missed the first question.
Sorry to interrupt you again, but yeah, that's not anymore an existential risk, but also some people think we will fuse with, but okay, that's not anymore than really an existential risk. Sorry.
Well, that's interesting. Like, I think the fusing thing, like earlier on, I had some intuitions about this. Like, yeah, maybe we can like combine and we have like some sort of transhuman thing. But then I thought it doesn't really make sense because if you have this thing which is more capable than us, like we wouldn't bring anything to the table. Like it would just do its thing without us. So I don't think I don't think the fusion paths are very likely. Maybe it would be good if something like this happens. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if most people would agree with this.
Yeah, because it's a bit weird. It depends the difference between the two level of intelligence is because it's like, are we going like in my daily life? I don't really have an ant with me, and I don't help ants and birds so much. I mean, I don't mind them, they're fine. But as soon as I see maybe something that I don't really like, it's a different story if it's an insect. So maybe the insect, when they saw a human arrive on the planet, they saw, oh, maybe this species can be good for us. So they can give us more stuff. Yeah, but and it's the same with chess, for example. Since the AI are more capable than us at playing chess, if we have a human in the loop, it's basically noise. The AI is much faster without the human to beat us. So
Oh, that's a perfect argument. Yeah.
I think the question Didier asked first was also, I think he said something about Watson, if I can maybe re-ask it quickly. Basically, do you expect maybe another AI winter? That may be a possibility. We might realize, I don't know, like the deep learning revolution is plateauing, so we don't have enough data, or the compute doesn't lead to anywhere. We need to find another breakthrough. So maybe this is going to take 10, 20 years before we see a new AI summer, and this is enough to make progress on alignment.
It could be. Like I think it's within the realm of possibilities. It's so hard to predict like what will happen. Yeah. But I feel like what has happened in the past is that pretty much everyone underestimated the rate of progress pretty consistently. And that includes myself, right? I have also I've been basically too pessimistic about how long it takes. So, but I feel like it's we don't know. And we should err on the side of caution. Like even if there is just a 10% chance that this current paradigm will scale up to super intelligent AI, we should not, we shouldn't take that gamble. It's so incredibly dangerous. Like even if it was maybe just 1%, I would argue we shouldn't do it. The risks are too high. If I had some sort of certainty and proof about that it will take at least 20 years, then I would probably not have started PauseAI. But just the uncertainty itself and the amount of arrows pointing towards shit's going down really, really soon, that's very worrying for me, and like enough of reason to say shut it all down.
Yeah.
And maybe you didn't say that explicitly, but I want to say it. Well, I suppose you will approve explicitly if when, let's say, the people in the street or the large majority of people, when you ask them and they understand that there is a serious risk of destroying humanity in the process, they, almost 100% of them agree that we have to pause. So since we are in relatively democratic countries, we should take this in consideration also, and we don't at the moment.
Yeah, the next question is about the summit in Paris on AI in February. So it's the 10th and 11th of February. What is your expectation for this event?
So I don't have high expectations for this specific summit, unfortunately. So basically, when we started PauseAI and we started protesting, we were asking very, very explicitly for a summit. We said, please organize an international summit, work towards a treaty. This is the only place where it can happen, and it needs to happen there. And then Rishi Sunak organized the first AI safety summit in Bletchley Park. We were really ecstatic, so happy that was happening. And then, that summit came and went. There was a Bletchley Declaration, but no serious regulations being created. Then there was a mini summit in Seoul, which didn't really do a lot of things. And now the next one is going to be in Paris. This is going to be the big summit. But as soon as it was announced, the name was changed from AI Safety Summit to AI Action Summit. And it was very clear that the people who are organizing this summit, they have no idea what they're talking about. I honestly think that they have no idea what kind of risks are involved, and they're not taking this seriously. I think it's absolutely a shame to see how little focus there is on AI safety during this next summit. The program, I think there were 5 categories, and none of them were basically diving into the safety issues, the existential risks from AI. So I feel like our leaders are screwing us over. They're not being the adults in the room. They should be focusing on the small things that things go really, really wrong in very short amount of time. They need to consider the worst possible outcomes and prevent these from happening. And right now they're just looking away. They're just ignoring the problems. They're ignoring all the warning calls. They're ignoring the AI safety researchers. They're ignoring the AI experts like Benjo and Hinton. It's a disgrace. So my expectation isn't great. This is also why we're organizing an international protest. We're organizing a protest in Paris, but also in 14 other cities across the globe to get more attention on AI safety. Basically, to ask the people, demand that the people at this summit will spend their time in a useful way to prevent the worst from happening, because that's the only place in the world where it can happen. Individual countries cannot stop this. It needs to happen at a treaty level, at a summit level. And this is a huge opportunity. And I feel like it's one of the most important things we could focus on and get people to spend their time persuading attendees and politicians that they have a moral obligation to prevent catastrophe from happening.
Yeah. Concerning the organization of the next summit, so it's organized by France, and the situation is even worse than what you say. It's not that they don't speak about existential risk. That's in some documents they explicitly say, what is not true, that there is a kind of a consensus that there is that the existential risks are not so big or even don't exist. It's very, very strange, and you know,
is misleading.
Also for the people listening, the situation at the moment is in France. It's kind of paradoxal, because you know, French people are very often kind of contrarians and afraid of technological progress, but here it's the other direction. The President Macron and the most well-known AI scientist on the French-speaking world, Yann Lequin, and the people making the AI Mistral, they are all in favor of, let's say, accelerating without many nuance. Now, they were officially, how can you say that, contacts with the civil society and contact with citizens. And one of the proposals of the citizens was explicitly stop all AI. So not only AGI, but stop all AI. So this was a conclusion of this study of what people think, but I'm almost sure that they will not speak about that when they will speak about consultation of civil society. And concerning civil society, also there was one point explicitly, speak more about existential risk, but there also, I'm afraid the leaders will not speak about that. So like you say, it's important to have actions, but I will ask you what are the actions that we could have also, not only people in PauseAI, but other people who are interested in this problem. And I will give you my point of view. I'm afraid, of course, actions are important, but those actions have to be before the summit, not after. That's, well, of course, also after, but they are more important before the summit. And I'm afraid if you don't have contacts directly with, let's say, high people in charge, it's not going to have a big impact. But
about this last point, I think it's really important. Like, I think anyone can have a far larger impact than they think if they just send an email to these high people in charge. Like, it is absolutely wild how few people are trying to reach out to high politicians or ministers directly. Almost no one does this, right? So they don't get that many emails. And like, I'm constantly trying to do this, right? I'm constantly speaking with PauseAI volunteers, just getting them to send emails to politicians. It's very hard to convince people to do this because people find it very awkward to reach out to someone who is that high in power, right? There's like this power asymmetry, and we're basically taught as children, like, you kind of leave the really powerful people alone. You're not worthy enough to speak up to them. But please do it. Please send an email to a politician. It is really one of the most overpowered things you can do with your time. I've personally had big successes just reaching out to politicians and saying, hey, listen, I'm concerned about AI. Here's some information about this. Just link to a bunch of studies, a link to quotes from high status AI researchers. And that can get you a conversation. And in that conversation, you can talk about the policy measures that are needed. But we need people to speak up and reach out to these politicians because otherwise they just don't know. And it's like completely outside of their sphere. So I think sending emails to politicians is the number one thing I would recommend to people. The number two thing is join a protest, because protests are a way to show the world that you care enough. You care so much about this topic. You're willing to spend your free time, go on the streets, hold up a sign, right? Like that is something that is, I think, is really powerful. And it gives off a strong signal, and politicians do listen to that. But but like also what you two are doing right now, like getting more attention to this problem, just speaking about it, discovering like other opinions about it, that is also something that I think anyone can do. Find a stage, small or big, get people to talk about this. But just don't keep it to yourself. Mm-hmm. Be loud, be active, inform the world. We all have a moral obligation to do something, because right now we know about this thing, and we have like an obligation to protect the rest of our species and inform other people of these risks. Because who else is going to do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think so. I guess to conclude, if someone wants to know more after this conversation, they can go to PauseAI, the website, I suppose. And you have, I guess, what's the list of things people can do online and look for more resources and send emails to their politician, of course.
Yes. And join PauseAI, like the French branch of PauseAI, led by Maxime Founet. He's doing amazing work in France. And he's got a very, very cool community of people around him who all like spending their volunteer time trying to save the world. It's really inspiring.
Yeah, and I just want to maybe for people who listen, they can hear my conversation with Maxime on this podcast as well, if they want to have the PauseAI French version. But that was very, very good. Thank you again, Joep, for your time.
It was great speaking with you, and keep up the good work informing people about these important topics. Thank you.